So what do I mean by global currency, and how did the US do this? So the US, back in 1944, it held more than 50% of the world reserve in gold. So saying that properly, if every country, okay, stacked up all the gold that they had in reserves to back up their money, okay, so meaning like, okay, this dollar, this, if you're talking to that alien, to me as an alien, this isn't necessarily worth anything, yet it symbolizes that in a bank, there's a certain amount of gold. And that gold is something that everyone agrees has a certain amount of value. Okay. So that's where, this can be exchanged. And this is a heck of a lot lighter to carry around than gold, right? Well, if you added up what every one of these countries had in gold and stacked it all up or weighed it, the US, one country, had more than all of these other countries combined, all of these other 44 countries combined. And so the US had a lot of freaking gold. Okay. And so the US basically said, hey guys, if all of you, instead of worrying about like, hey, where are we going to get all this gold from and blah, 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 how about instead you just start holding dollar bills, US dollar bills in your savings accounts, in your banking accounts here, your reserves, so that, yeah, your currency is backed up by gold via being backed up by the US dollar. So your currency is backed up by the US dollar and the US dollar is backed up by gold. So it's basically the same thing. And yeah, if you end up needing some gold, you give us these dollars and we'll exchange it and give you the gold. Okay. Sounds like a reasonable trade-off, right? Well, this meant holding a dollar was the same basically as having gold. A lot easier to transport. And it gave everyone one shared medium of exchange. Okay. Everyone could go, whether it was and I'm using Peru here, Peruvian dollars, Mexican pesos, Indian rupee, Canadian dollar, a Swiss franc, any of those, the commonality between them all became, hey, we will right here use a US dollar to exchange. That's what we're all tied to in that. And so it makes it easier. It makes it easier. You're not shipping gold all around or other weird, heavy things that can get robbed and, jacked and sink in the sea and stuff like that. And so all the countries agreed. Okay. They agreed to hold the US dollar in their reserves because the US was holding the most gold. Now, has any country ever in the history of the world ever not held up their end of the agreement? I mean, what could go wrong? Okay. Well, if any of the countries had looked back only 11 years to 1933, just 11 short years earlier, they would have seen how every country, including the United States, will act in its own self-interest when put with its back against a wall. And guys, I'm not here. Please hear me. There are people out there bashing this and that and whatever. I'm not bashing. Okay. We're talking just simple history and the way humans respond over time. Because at the end of the day, countries are run by humans. And so in 1933, that was coming out of the Depression. Okay. The US was in a tight spot. So what did the US do? Well, President Roosevelt signed, and some of you are going to be like, what? Research it. All right. This President Roosevelt signed the Gold Reserve Act, which made owning gold, basically it made all gold outside of some gold coins. And as far as gold jewelry, it made owning gold illegal for US citizens. Okay. For US citizens. And it also stopped in 1933 exchanging for countries that did have dollars, or even for citizens. Anyone. You used to be able to go into a bank and exchange money for gold. Okay. Well, it overnight said, we're not exchanging gold for money. And if you have any gold, we're not buying it from you. No, they did some gangster shit. They said, you have 1 month to turn in your gold, or You're going to prison for 10 years and you're going to be fined more than what was the average annual salary back then. Okay. So imagine, like, within 1 month, the United States government, for those of you that live in the US, this is not even 100 years ago. And the US overnight signed a decree that said you have 1 month to turn over all of your gold, or get thrown in prison for 10 years and be fined over a year's salary for the average US worker. All right, that's some hardcore Well, that might be where the phrase around and find out came from. All right. You'll see, like I said, there's good intentions. All right. I'm not coming against anyone. I'm not coming against the US government or Roosevelt or anyone. Okay. The point is just simply when countries, they face tough decisions, and there's no countries today facing tough decisions, right? Like the world is just harmonious as ever. I think not. It does what it's going to do its best to come out on top. And so these 44 countries did look past what the US did in the past. They agreed upon this, and Bretton Woods was signed. So did the US keep its agreement? Did the US keep its end of the deal? Surprisingly, we can get an overwhelming hell yes, it did. Until it didn't. Come on, we wouldn't be here if the US government had kept its word. The US did keep its word until it didn't. And August 15th, 1971, the US President Richard Nixon, who's famous for some other things. However, in 71, he directed the Treasury, the US Treasury, to once again stop exchanging US dollars for gold. And basically, the US economy needed, what happened is the US economy needed to print more dollars than there was gold, because of just various stuff going on in the economy at the time. And so the US did what it had to do. All right. And so rather than ruin its own economy, it calculated a decision to break the Bretton Woods Agreement. And 27 years later, it was done. The Bretton Woods Agreement was over. So in 27 years, I mean, that's a long time in government. It would be like having an iPod that still worked today and was used. Like, that was a long time that happened. Still, Bretton Woods was no more. It was dead. So what did this mean? Well, instantly in that move, the developed world, all of those countries were no longer on the gold standard, and all of this became what we now call fiat money. Fiat, paper, meaning it's not backed by any hard substance. Okay. So what does fiat mean? Well, the currency of a nation, like the US dollar here, is only as strong as the country issuing it. Fortunate for those holding US dollars, the US economy and military, it is unparalleled to anything in history. All right. The might of the United States' military and the strength of the economy. So countries' economies now is what these stand for. All right. So in an imperfect and broken system, the US dollar has seemed to still be the best choice in an unideal situation. Because so many nations held so many US dollars, today's dollar is both a country currency like franc or a peso or Australian dollar or Canadian dollar or what have you. It's national for those in the United States. It also is a global currency for the current monetary system. And this may be shifting a bit, but still in 2022, okay, when you looked at foreign reserves, so all the countries reporting, hey, we're holding X amount of Japanese yen or, just different currencies to back up our, currency, whatever nation that is. This is crazy. 58% of reported foreign reserves were still held in the US dollar. 58%. So that means that if you went to all of these countries and you said, add in all of your euros, the British pound, the yen, the Chinese currency, if you added in all of these currencies, sounds like a familiar story to gold earlier, doesn't it? If you added in if you stacked up all of those currencies, they would not pile as high as the US dollar. All of those currencies combined don't stack as high as the US dollar. So the US has still maintained, 50 years later, significant strength globally, okay? And a lot of people like to on the US and this and that. And look, we'll unpack. I mean, I don't think we even need to unpack per se the challenges facing the world and the US dollar right now. However, it has fared extremely well. And, you know, even crude oil, crude oil pumped in the US or Saudi Arabia or you know, China, traded in dollars. Okay. Now that's shifting a tiny bit, yet it's priced in dollars. Everything is priced in dollars. And that has not changed. And so if you've ever wondered why over the years, the US has had a little bit of an interesting dynamic with Saudi Arabia, well, number one, oil dependence. We wanted our oil. Number two, Saudi Arabia, you know, controlled OPEC to some extent. Other members of OPEC would take offense at that. They have a strong sway, okay, over all oil producing countries because they hold so much oil. And as a result, they are the ones that have kept the dollar trading for oil. Okay. So again, just love things the way they are. Okay. Okay. I'm not going to read your minds over what you're thinking. But there's a lot to process there. Okay. With things. So while the current global fiat landscape currently, guys, the fiat landscape, we haven't seen this in several generations where we're at, and anything is absolutely possible. That being said, if I were limited to using only fiat money for holding its worth, for me, I'm using the US dollar. Like, I'm not counting it out anytime soon.